The rain wasn't supposed to fall this hard. Not this early. Not like this. The sky cracked open without warning, and the river retaliated with a vengeance. In the dead of night, water swallowed the streets like an open mouth, roaring through alleyways, flooding homes, and dragging secrets from beneath the floorboards. A small raft scraped along a submerged street. Its only passenger, a man in his 30s, soaked in orange gear, gripping a rope with one hand and a flashlight with the other. His breath was visible in the frigid air, each exhale a prayer. He heard them before he saw them, a child's scream, sharp and desperate. He turned. A second-floor window flickered with light. A woman's face pressed against the glass, wide-eyed with terror. The water had nearly reached the window's edge. There wasn't time to think. He pushed off, boots slipping on the raft's slick floor. He didn't know their names. He didn't know that inside that house was a secret that lived just 3 blocks from his own. He didn't care who they were. He didn't ask. In those moments, everyone was equal in fear. The water didn't choose favorites, and neither did he. The man clambered toward the house's exterior, feeling the current tug against him like ghost hands trying to pull him under. "Open the window," he shouted, the wind swallowing most of his words. Inside, the woman struggled with the latch, the frame swollen with water. Her child clutched her coat, crying softly. Finally, the lock gave way. The window burst open, and she screamed as cold wind and water surged in. He steadied the raft beneath the window, reaching up. "Pass me the boy first," he ordered. Her hands trembled. She hesitated, and he barked again, sharper now. "Do it." The boy came down, pale and shivering, into his arms. He cradled the child close, shielding him with his body. "You're safe," he whispered, though he wasn't sure anyone truly was. Back on the raft, the boy curled against his side like a drenched kitten. The man turned back toward the house, arms raised. "Ma'am, now you." She shook her head frantically. "What about my husband?" she yelled. "I can't leave without him." The man's jaw clenched. "Where is he?" he barked. Her voice cracked. Downstairs, he went to check the breaker. The man's stomach dropped. The basement. A death trap. He glanced at the boy, then at the sky. Time was killing them. He climbed back out of the raft, chest heaving with cold breath. "Stay with him," he told the mother, gesturing toward the raft. "Don't move." He vanished inside. Each step down the creaking, soaked staircase could have been the last. He called out once, twice. "Off." Then, a groan. He turned, flashlight scanning, and there, slumped by the panel, barely above the waterline, was the man. He didn't ask for a name, just grabbed under the arms and heaved. The unconscious man sputtered, coughing as his head lolled. The rescuer dragged him up the stairs, each step a battle against the weight of water and collapsing adrenaline. Upstairs, the woman sobbed as she saw them appear, her hand flying to her mouth. "He's alive!" she cried. The rescuer didn't stop. He carried the man to the window, then lowered him onto the raft with a grunt. The boy huddled near the raft's edge, watching wide-eyed. "Everyone on board," the rescuer ordered. The woman followed, trembling. He pushed off, muscles screaming, guiding them through the rising flood. No one spoke for minutes. Just breathing. Just water. Just the sound of lives not yet lost. The raft drifted into open current, guided by instinct more than sight. The rescuer rowed with all that remained. Then the boy, breaking the silence, said quietly, "That's where we work." He pointed across the street to a modern-looking single-story brick building, barely visible through the mist. The rescuer glanced back. "That?" he asked. The woman nodded. "We started it together. We built smart home systems, the kind that should have warned us this flood was coming." Her voice cracked. "We failed." The rescuer said nothing, just rowed harder. He'd passed that building every day. Never knew it was theirs. Never guessed the strangers he just saved were neighbors, tech founders, people who built futures. None of that mattered now. All that mattered was they were alive. And he was still rowing. The emergency shelter was a converted high school gym. Harsh lights, cots pressed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with sweat, damp clothes and murmurs. The rescuer sat on a bench by the door, peeling off his soaked gloves. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from adrenaline leaving his system. A nurse walked by, nodding politely, offering him a cup of lukewarm coffee. He accepted it with a grunt of thanks. Across the room, the family huddled beneath foil blankets. The boy waved when their eyes met. The rescuer offered a tired smile. He still didn't know their names. It felt wrong to ask now. Like he'd ruined something sacred by turning this into small talk. Around him, chaos surged. Phones rang, volunteers rushed, evacuees cried. But inside that moment, watching them breathe together, alive, he felt something rare. Stillness. He finally stood. His legs protested, but he crossed the gym. The woman looked up. "You saved my family," she said, voice hushed reverent. He shook his head. "No, I did what anyone would." The boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, tell him." She hesitated, then met the rescuer's eyes. We've seen you before. At the cafe near 9th Street, you always sit by the window. You live in the green duplex, don't you?" The man blinked. "Yeah." Her voice softened. "We'll live just a block over. We've seen you every week for years." The rescuer felt the floor shift. Familiar strangers. Ghosts from daily life now made real. "You never said anything," he murmured. The woman smiled sadly. "Neither did you." They spoke for a while, about the flood, the startup, the randomness of everything. The woman's name was Lena. Her husband, Mark, died. Their son, Jacob, Dada. Lena described their company, how it began in their garage, how they'd struggled, risked it all, and how the smart sensor systems they built were meant to protect homes just like theirs. "But we hadn't installed our own yet," Mark added bitterly. "Too busy saving the world to save ourselves." The rescuer nodded slowly. "That's how it always goes," he said. "Fix everything except the thing closest to you." Lena looked at him, eyes brimming. "You saved our lives. That's more than tech ever did." He didn't respond. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew there was someone he hadn't saved before. Later, the rescuer stood outside under a makeshift awning, watching the rain taper to mist. The storm had broken, but the damage was done. Homes gutted. Lives upturned. Memories floating downstream. He thought of the family again, not just what he'd done for them, but what they'd unknowingly given him. A reason. A reminder. He remembered his sister's face, from that storm years ago. How he'd been too late then. How the water had taken her. He never told anyone. Not even now. But something in Lena's words had pierced that place inside him. He'd boarded up. A wound opened just enough to breathe. Lena found him out there, silent, stretching between them. "You okay?" she asked gently. He nodded, not trusting his voice. "You didn't have to come back inside," she said. "You already did enough." He finally spoke. "I couldn't leave. Not yet." She stepped beside him, staring at the same distant nothing. "Funny thing," she said. "I always thought tech would save the world. Sensors, systems, AI warnings. But it was just a man in a raft." He exhaled. "That's all any of us are. Rafts." She looked up. "Do you want to come by the office sometime? When it's dry? You might like what we're building." He smiled. "Yeah, I think I would." The next morning, the sky was raw with morning light. He walked the flooded street back toward his block. Silent, changed. The floodwater had begun to recede, revealing warped fences, shattered glass, upturned mailboxes. As he passed familiar houses, he noticed what was gone. A dog's collar on the curb, children's toys tangled in silt. At the corner of his own street he paused. There it was, the startup building. Waterlogged but standing. He had passed it 1,000 times, never looked twice. Now, it felt different. It carried faces now. Stories. Let him learn. He didn't enter. Just stood across from it, watching as if it might speak. His boots sank into the mud. Behind him, the sound of a generator coughing to life. Life was coming back, but not the same. Nothing ever did after a flood. Lena called that afternoon. "We're checking on the office," she said. "Want to come?" He hesitated. Then, "Yeah, I'll meet you there." The inside of the building smelled of damp drywall and loss. Computer towers floated in ankle-deep water. Cords dangled like lifeless vines. Lena moved slowly, touching desks, filing cabinets, photos stuck to walls. "We were going to unveil the new security interface next week," Mark muttered. "Guess that's off." The rescuer looked at the warped screen by the window. "Does it still matter?" Lena turned. "It has to. Otherwise, what did we build this for?" He nodded. Not because he agreed, but because he understood. They salvaged what they could. Hard drives, whiteboards, documents smudged but legible. Jacob sat in a corner drawing with a pen on damp printer paper. The rescuer watched him quietly. A child untouched by the pressure of survival, still creating in the middle of ruin. "He's always been like that," Lena said. "Keeps going, no matter what." The rescuer knelt beside Jacob. "What are you drawing?" "A boat," the boy said. "Like yours." The rescuer smiled. "Looks sturdier than mine." Jacob grinned. "Yours was faster." That simple sentence hit harder than anything else that week. Faster meant lives saved. Faster meant he was there, when it counted. Later, they stepped outside, sun now cutting through the cloud cover. Lena leaned against the doorway, breathing in the smell of wet pavement and new air. "We're rebuilding," she said simply. Mark nodded behind her, cradling a salvaged server in his arms like a baby. The rescuer looked back at the building. "You'll make it better," he said. "Stronger." Lena looked up at him. "We'll try. With people like you around, maybe we'll get it right this time." He didn't respond. Just nodded once and walked off down the street. He didn't need thanks. He needed the walk. He needed to let the silence stretch again, to give space for the grief to catch up. As he reached his doorstep, something unexpected caught his eye. A bouquet wrapped in plastic, tied to the railing with a simple note. "Thank you." It wasn't signed by Lena or Mark. Just Jacob. He picked it up gently, the flowers trembling in his grip. He stood there a long time, reading the note again and again. That night, he placed it on the windowsill, where light could touch it. He poured himself a glass of water, sat in silence, and let his breathing steady. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel haunted. The silence didn't echo loss. It felt like something new, something earned. Not because the world had changed, but because he had. A week passed. The water dried, but the town didn't feel dry. Streets cracked from beneath. Homes stood open to the wind, like wounds healing too slowly. At the tech office, construction tape danced in the breeze. Inside, the skeleton crew worked by flashlight, salvaging systems. The rescuer had stopped by once or twice, never stayed long. But one morning, he found himself outside again. This time he entered. The hum of generators echoed through the halls. Lena looked up from her desk, startled but smiling. "Didn't think we'd see you again," she said. He shrugged. "Didn't plan to." She nodded knowingly. "Neither did we, yet here we are." Something in her tone was different now. Not gratitude. Not pity. Respect. That afternoon, Mark invited him to test their prototype, the sensor they never installed in their own home. The rescuer watched the screen light up, showing real-time diagnostics, moisture levels, wind speeds, vibration alerts. "This thing can detect water creeping through drywall," Mark said proudly. "It speaks before the flood does." The rescuer traced a finger along the casing. You really think it can stop what happened last week? Mark hesitated. Not always, but maybe it buys someone 5 minutes. Maybe enough to run, maybe enough to survive. That was enough. That was everything. Later, Jacob tugged the rescuer's sleeve. "Want to see something?" He followed the boy down the hallway to a back room filled with drawings taped to the walls. Boats, houses, drones, even a funny cartoon version of the rescuer in his orange gear. "This is my rescue lab," Jacob said proudly. "I'm gonna build floodbots someday." The rescuer chuckled. "Looks like you already started." He tapped one drawing, 2 figures in a boat, silhouetted under stars. "That you and your mom?" Jacob shook his head. "That's you and me." The rescuer's voice caught. "You kept that night?" The boy nodded. "I don't forget the people who show up." Word spread. The rescue wasn't just a story anymore. It was becoming a symbol. Neighbors began showing up, some with tools, others with food. A volunteer brought salvaged wiring. Another dropped off clean servers. A community began rebuilding, not just walls but trust. Lena organized a live demo of their flood alert system. "This isn't just about us," she told the crowd. "It's about warning the next house, saving the next family." Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled. The rescuer stood behind them all, quiet, unnoticed. Just how he preferred it. Until someone called his name. He turned. It was the mayor. "You're the reason this started," she said. "You brought them back." That night, he sat again at his kitchen table, a piece of paper in his hand. It was Jacob's drawing, the boat, the stars, the 2 figures. He taped it above his window, right beside the flowers. Then he sat back and breathed. Maybe it wasn't about fixing the whole world. Maybe it was just about showing up when it mattered. About not letting silence win. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Lena. "I want to help, however I can." Seconds later, a reply lit the screen. "Then come by tomorrow. We're building more than sensors now." He smiled. For the first time, not because something was over, but because something real was beginning. The next morning he returned, not with a raft, but with gloves and boots. The tech office was humming now, alive with movement. Volunteers unloaded supplies, electricians repaired junction boxes, coders huddled over laptops. Lena greeted him with a hard hat and a grin. "Hope you don't mind getting your hands dirty." "Never did," he replied, taking the helmet. They worked side by side installing wall mounts for the new flood sensors. "We're putting these in homes first," she said. "Free, no barriers." He nodded. "That's how you save real people." Mark emerged from the back, carrying a bin of labeled prototypes. "We want you to name the network," he said. The rescuer paused. "Name it, you earned that," Lena added. He looked around at people helping strangers, at code saving lives, and thought of Jacob's boat. "Call it RAFNet," he said. The news picked up fast. Local tech startup teams with unknown hero to launch flood network. Did once. Cameras rolled as the team launched RAFNet from a temporary command center. The rescuer kept to the shadows, not used to the spotlight, but Lena pulled him forward during the live stream. "He didn't build the code," she said, "but he built the reason for it." Viewers flooded the comment feed. "Finally, tech with a heart. Give that man a medal," I cried watching this. He stepped up to the mic, awkward at first. "I'm not a hero," he said. "Just a guy who happened to be in the right boat." But the crowd clapped anyway. Not because he asked for it, but because they knew. Later that night, back home, he scrolled through old photos. There weren't many, just a few. One of his sister years ago laughing with her feet in a river. He hadn't looked at it in years. He zoomed in on her eyes, alive, unafraid. "I didn't save you," he whispered, voice cracking. "But I think I just helped save someone else." He didn't cry, He just sat there, letting the memory rest in the room like a guest he was finally ready to welcome. The guilt didn't leave, but it softened, became a scar instead of a wound. He tapped the screen gently, then turned it off. The dark room held him, not as punishment, but as peace. Days later, a letter arrived. No postage. Hand-delivered. It was from Jacob. D. Dear Mr. Rescuer, it began in uneven handwriting. You saved us, but you also helped my mom smile again. That's why I drew another boat. This one's big enough for everyone. I named it Hope. Attached was a crayon drawing, massive, colorful, with people of all shapes and ages aboard a smiling raft. In the corner, two stick figures sat together under a starry sky. He laughed, softly, brokenly, and pinned it up next to the first one. He stared at it long, hand on the wall, heart beating slow but strong. Hope, he whispered. Guess that's what this is now. He returned to the river a week later, the same stretch where he'd once lost and found so much. The waters were calm now, glassy and slow, as if apologizing. He walked along the bank until he reached the tree where he used to sit as a boy, where he last saw his sister safe. Pulling a small folded paper from his jacket, he placed it in the river. A miniature paper boat, drawn with Jacob's design. He watched it float. It didn't need to go far. It just needed to exist. Behind him, the world kept turning. Cars, birds, laughter from the far side of the park. But in that 1 second, nothing moved, except the boat. And that was enough. The months rolled forward like tidewater, slow, steady, reshaping everything in silence. RAFnet grew. Neighborhood by neighborhood, sensor by sensor. Floods didn't stop, but the warnings came sooner, louder. Lena and Mark brought on new hires, trained locals, and set up a central command room. And the rescuer? He stayed. Not in uniform, but in presence. He tested prototypes, sat in strategy meetings, helped teach evacuation drills to school kids. He didn't say much, but when he did, people listened. He wasn't the man they called in panic anymore. He was the one they turned to for planning, before the panic started. One day, Lena pulled him aside. We're applying for federal grants, she said. To take RAFnet national. He raised an eyebrow. Big step. She smiled. Yeah, but we need a story, one people will remember, one that shows why this matters. He frowned. I'm not a story, you're the story, she replied. Not because of what happened, but because you didn't walk away after it did. He was quiet. Then, okay, but I'll tell it my way. She nodded. That's all I want. That night, he opened a blank document on his laptop. Not a report. Not a biography. Just a story about a boat, a boy, and a flood. And the man who stayed. Weeks later, at a tech conference packed with CEOs and analysts, the lights dimmed. A screen came to life, not with charts or code, but a quiet image of a paper boat. The audience leaned in. Then came the story of a man who rode through floodwaters, saved a family he didn't know, and discovered they owned a startup that would one day protect thousands. His voice narrated every beat, calm and stripped of ego. I didn't know who they were, he said. Didn't matter. Fear makes strangers equal, and kindness doesn't check credentials. The crowd rose to their feet before the video even ended. Not for drama, but for truth. Back home, Jacob watched the same video with his class. That's my friend, he said proudly. His classmates were in awe. The guy from the boat? One whispered. Yeah, Jacob grinned. He works with my mom and dad now. A girl asked. Was he scared? Jacob paused. Maybe, but he still came. At the front of the room, their teacher wiped her eyes discreetly and wrote a single word on the whiteboard. Courage. Jacob stared at it, then took out a crayon and drew a raft under the word, filled with people. And above it, in bold red, he wrote, RAFnet. That evening, the rescuer returned to the shelter gym. It wasn't filled with evacuees anymore. Just folded chairs, Quiet echoes. And a new plaque by the door. The day we floated home, in honor of those who stay. He traced the lettering with his fingers. No mention of names. No titles. Just a moment etched in metal. Behind him, the gym lights flickered on. Lena stood there, holding coffee. "Thought you might come back," she said. "Old habits," he replied. She handed him the cup. "You okay?" He took a sip, nodded slowly. I finally am." Outside, the sky cracked open again, but this time, they were ready. Storm season returned with little mercy. New alerts echoed across the town. Phones buzzed. Sirens groaned. Water levels climbed. But this time, the warnings came early. Houses blinked with sensor lights. Evacuation drills ran like clockwork. And in the new RAFNet control room, the rescuer stood behind the monitors, headset on, steady. "Zone 4 needs reroute support," someone called. He checked the screen, eyes scanning data. "Divert through East Levee," he said calmly. "Tell local units to set staging at Lincoln and 7th. Around him, volunteers moved fast, but not frantic. This was what preparedness looked like. Not absence of fear, but presence of readiness. No one waited for the flood to speak first anymore. Outside, families were already moving. Streets weren't chaotic. They were organized. At the community center, Lena greeted evacuees with calm. "You're safe," she said again and again. Mark distributed supplies like clockwork. Jacob helped pass out ponchos, laughing when one slipped over a toddler's head sideways. Above the door, a new digital sign blinked. RAFNet operational. All sensors green. The rescuer stepped outside for a moment. Rain fell gently. Steady, not wild. For once, the town didn't panic. They prepared. And that was the difference. That's what had changed since the raft. Later that night, as the worst of the storm passed, the rescuer returned to the river. The current moved, but not in fury. He stood at the same spot where he once released Jacob's drawing into the water. Now he held another, a new one. A blueprint sketched by Jacob, aged a little, smarter now. For future rafts, it read, with diagrams of solar panels and emergency radios. He smiled, unfolded the paper boat, and let it go. It floated slow, as if sensing it wasn't racing death this time, but drifting with purpose. The river accepted it, and he stood long after it vanished around the bend. Back home, the rescuer sat at his window again. The two drawings still hung on the wall, one named Hope, the other Everyone. But now, a third joined them. The blueprint. A trio of stories, floating side by side. He didn't feel haunted anymore. He felt necessary. Across the street, porch lights flicked on. Neighbors waved. A small girl across the road drew her own raft in chalk on the sidewalk. He watched her, smile deepening. The flood had taken many things, but it gave him this: a reason to be, a reason to stay, a reason to build. He stood once more at the tech office's new glass door. Etched into it now were words he hadn't seen before. Founded in crisis, grown in kindness, guided by those who stayed. His reflection shimmered in the glass. Older now, maybe, but more whole. Behind him, Jacob came running. "Hey, we need help calibrating Zone 7. The rescuer turned, laughing. "I'm coming." And just before he stepped inside, he paused, just long enough to whisper to no one and everyone, "You'll never know I forgave you." That was the point. Then the door opened, and he disappeared into something bigger than the flood.